Aloha. In this video, we are going to use our Windows Server 2016 instance and configure IIS on that instance in EC2. Then we will make it accessible through the EC2 firewall. So what our setup is, we have a Windows Server 2016 instance. Right here is the base instance. This is a free tier instance. It's a T2 micro. We're going to remote desktop into this and walk through the process of setting up IIS, which is the Windows web server. In a video we did not too long ago, we basically did the same process for this Ubuntu virtual machine, but we set up Apache instead of IIS because the platform was Ubuntu. If you want to figure out how to use AWS EC2 and how to connect to the Windows server, that's another video as well. So this one, the purpose is to use the existing instance to set up IIS. So right now I've got this is the instance. I have a remote desktop connection to it. So I'm going to run the RDP session, which is right here. And you see this is 1359 193.25, which is the same machine right here we have in AWS. So the first thing we are going to do in order to set up IIS is go to the Start button here, go to Server Manager. Server Manager allows you to configure the role and features, as it says right here, or manage other servers for Windows. So what we're going to do is add roles and features. If you click on this, you can walk through these options here. Click on Next. Right here, we're going to add role-based or feature-based installation. Click on Next. We'll go ahead and click on Next here. This is the only server where you are configuring. And right here we have a set of options we can choose. If we wanted to promote this to be an Active Directory domain controller, we would select Active Directory Domain Services. And if you click on any of these, it gives you a description over here on the right. For our scenario, we want to select Web Server IIS. We click on this. Whoop. And it even tells you it provides a reliable, manageable, and scalable web application infrastructure. It doesn't say it provides you a secure one. So let's check this box here. And a little thing pops up here that says there's additional features you may need to add, basically. And these, since we're only having one server, we're only setting up one server, we need to add these tools on this system. Because we could manage this server from a different server, and if we had it set up that way, we would not need the tools on this server. But in this case, we need to add these features here. Click on Add Features, and we'll go ahead and click on Next. And here is some other items we may want to install. A lot of different features here. We'll go ahead and click on Next, though. And it walks you through. It's like a wizard, of course. Right here it even says wizard. Microsoft has lots of wizards. And we'll go ahead and click on Next. And then here we get to some of the roles with IIS. This is how we're basically going to configure it and some of the things we need to consider. We can leave all these selected by default for now, and you can add them later if you want to change them. But we have a default document, which is good. We're going to allow directory browsing. This is not really that secure, but we'll leave it configured now. We'll do some logging. We'll do some compression, which is good. We'll leave off FTP. So go ahead and click on Next. So I did not change any of these settings. Click on Next. And then right here, we can click on install, and it says to restart the destination server automatically if required. So that'll restart it automatically. Let's leave it unchecked and click on install. This will take a couple minutes to install here. It looks like the installation succeeded. It took a couple minutes there. I paused the video while that was going. So we can go ahead and click on close here. And then we can close our server manager. We can go back to the start button. If I scroll down here to Windows Administrative Tools, I can scroll here. I see a new one, Internet Information Services Manager. That's what the IIS stands for. So let's click on that. So this is the interface to manage the web server. And there's a lot of stuff in here to configure. We're not going to go through all this. We see over here on the right that it looks like the server is started. So let's verify that. So let's go to a browser. Let me go to the browser here in Windows Server 2016. And I'm going to connect to 127. Let's go ahead and click on OK there. I'll connect to 127.0.0.1 and see what comes up. So we have the default IIS page that shows up here, which is what we're looking for. That means we have it configured. Just to verify it's working, we can go over here and let's stop the server. So stop. Take a second to stop it. It looks like it's stopped because now start is available. Let's refresh this page. I just hit enter there, and it looks like it timed out. Well, we got a message here. Let's just add it and see what happens. Whatever. So it's timed out. So let's go back over here and start it again. And then we'll go back to this page, see if it comes up, hit enter. There it is. So we know we're actually hitting the web server. I mean, it's obvious we're doing 127.0.0.1, but it's good to verify things periodically. A couple other things we can do. We could change the default documents. So this is the default right here, which is this banner. We could change this to be our default web page, etc. We could also change the port this is listening on. Right now it's listening on port 80. So if we want to change the port this is listening on, we can expand over here on the left. This is the server we're looking at in this window right here. Let me make this larger. We can expand this right here, look at sites. So the default site we're running is on the system, which is this interface right here. And what we want to do is change the port the system is listening on. I can right click on default website, and you can look at some of the settings here, such as edit bindings, manage website. We can go to advanced settings. And you see right here, the binding is port 80. So if we want to change this to, let's say, port 8080, we can right click on this, go to edit bindings, and add HTTP on all the IP addresses for the system to be on port 8080. And now we see we've got this default web server is listening on port 8080 and 80. Let's go ahead and remove 80. So now we only have it listening on port 8080. So if we go up here, back to our browser, so this is port 80, hit enter. Looks like nothing's coming up, which we expect. Now to get to port 8080, we have to put a colon 8080, and there it is. So we've changed the web server to be on port 8080. Now that we have this set up, we still can't access it from the internet. So we have to modify the EC2 firewall. So I'm going to minimize this. This is the instance. It's selected. Once the instance is selected, you can go to the security groups. Mine is called launch-wizard-6. Yours will be something different more than likely. And you notice down here for the inbound rule, by default, a Windows instance on EC2 has port 3389 available. That is the port for remote desktop. So let's add port 8080 for HTTP. So let's click on Edit. Let's click on Add Rule, because if we modify this rule, it will modify the existing rule. So click on Add Rule. And if you select HTTP, it defaults to port 80, which is not what we want, because we set it up to run on port 8080. So we need to select Custom Protocol. So you see there's not an option for port 8080. So let's select Custom Protocol. I'm sorry, Custom TCP Rule. And let's select 8080 here. And we'll just call this IIS port, or TCP port 8080. And when that's configured, we went ahead and left the IP version 6 option there. So what this rule does is allows any source, which is what 0.0.0.0/0, that's anybody in the world, to connect to this instance on port 8080. So we can validate that by going up to here and typing in the public IP address, which we can find back here on the instance properties. We select the instance. Right here is the public IP address. We'll select that, and let's just try to connect to it on port 80, see what happens. So nothing should happen because port 80 is not open on the firewall, and port 80 is not configured on the system itself, the instance. And we validate here with the rule set, we should only see port 8080 open. So that's not going to work. So let's put :8080, and we should see the IIS page pop up. And it looks like we're not connecting for some reason, even on port 8080. So let's just try it again. It's okay, we can troubleshoot it. According to our firewall rules, we have one for 8080 for any source that it should be making it through, and this is inbound. For outbound, everything is allowed outbound, so we should be able to complete the three-way handshake, but we were experiencing some sort of issue. So let's do a little bit of troubleshooting here. So what I've done is I've downloaded on the 2016 image Wireshark. I'm going to go ahead and run it. I'm going to filter for port 8080. I was going to take this sort of troubleshooting out of the video, but I thought it might be useful. So let's go ahead and double click on Ethernet there, and I'll make this a little bit larger. You're going to see a lot of garbage here because we got our remote desktops connection on there. So let's make this a little bit bigger here, and I'm going to filter out the 3389 traffic. And realistically, all I want to look at is TCP port 8080. So I'm going to TCP.port equals 8080. Sorry, equals for Wireshark. The background turns green if it likes your syntax. So there's nothing there. So now let's just minimize this. We'll leave that open. We'll go back over to our browser over here, and we'll try to connect on port 8080. Okay, so looks like we made it through the EC2 firewall. So there's a problem with the web server itself, or how we have it configured. So it's good to do some troubleshooting like this so you know where in the process or what devices the traffic is making it through. So let's go ahead and look at this again. We'll stop the Wireshark capture, and we'll take a look at what's going on right here. So it looks like we sent 3 sends. Send. That's what this machine received, but typically you should see a send, a SYNAC, and then an ACK. So there is no three-way handshake completed. There's just the 3 sends. So there's some issue on this machine right here with the web server setup. As we configured earlier, we changed the binding here to be port 8080. So let's take a look to make sure this is listening on port 8080. The thing that makes the troubleshooting a little bit interesting is we can connect to the local host on port 8080. But let's see if it's listening outside of the local host on port 8080. So to do that troubleshooting, we're going to go to a netstat. So let's go to a command prompt. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Whoops, not that. Oh, that's right actually. Font 24. So let's go to command prompt. Let's do a netstat -an. And let's scroll up and see what ports this is listening on. So it looks like right here, our web server is listening on port 8080. We also see here an established connection from our host, or local host. So it looks like we're able to connect locally, but not from outside our local system. So we, as evidenced by our Wireshark over here, we were able to get through the EC2 firewall. So there must be a problem with this system. And what I'm thinking is it's probably the Windows firewall, because we can connect locally, which doesn't go through the Windows firewall, but we can't connect outside. And we are listening on that port. So let's take a look at the Windows firewall settings. And let's go down here to the network. I'm going to right click on it, go to open network properties here, and on the bottom left click on firewall. And you see it's on, which is good, but let's check the settings. Let's click on advanced settings right here. The Windows firewall, by the way, is highly underutilized, so this is going to take a second to pop up, maybe more than a second. There we go. So let's look at inbound rules. And there's a lot of stuff here, but let's look over here, scroll over here a little bit, and we can look at the protocol and the port. So you can sort by protocol. And we can look at the local port right here. So there's port 80, looks like it's not enabled. But I don't see anything for port 8080. And there should be no reason for port 8080 to be open anyway. So let's create a rule for port 8080. So let's go to new rule. And we're going to do a port. Click on next. TCP is the port, or the protocol. The port we're going to connect is 8080. Click on next. Allow the connection is the option we want. Next. We'll make this all three of these, that's fine. And we'll call this IIS port, TCP port. Port 8080, inbound web traffic on inbound. It's really inbound HTTP web traffic on port 8080. Okay, 8080. All right, finish that. Close this. We'll close this. Wireshark is stopped. Let's start it running again just to check. And something interesting already happened. You notice we got an ACK went back, 2 ACKs. So automatically I know this is working. And the 2 ACKs, let's just verify what those 2 ACKs were. So here's our system. It was pretty persistent. It just kept trying and finally connected. So that was the problem. So we validated it by doing a little bit of troubleshooting here. And Wireshark is always your friend. I highly recommend using Wireshark for this sort of activity because we're isolate the problem here. I already knew what the problem was, but I thought it'd be useful to show you Wireshark there. So in this video, we used our EC2 instance of Windows 2016 to set up IIS on. We configured IIS, set it up, and then we configured it to use a different port 8080, as we saw right here. And we took off port 80, where we started off by enabling the EC2 firewall for port 8080, but the traffic still wasn't getting through. At least it didn't appear like it from outside, from the internet. So then we did some troubleshooting with Wireshark, and we noticed that we only saw SYN packets and no SYN-ACK going back from traffic outside of the local host. That told us that the traffic was making it through the EC2 firewall, but it was being stopped by the host, the Windows host, which is why we modified the Windows firewall settings to allow port 8080 inbound. And then when we did that, we were able to connect as we validated by going to port 8080 right here. And we got the default page, which we expected. So that was the purpose of this video, is really to show you how to do all those things. I left the troubleshooting in there because it's useful to know how to troubleshoot those kind of problems you might encounter. But hopefully you were able to get your IIS system installed and set up on the Windows 2016 server and hit it from the internet. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them beneath the video. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave those too. All right, take care. See ya.